Hey folks, before we begin today's show, I want to thank our awesome sponsors. The first is Idle Academy. Idle is the first and only authorized vocational school for instructional design and online learning. It includes a comprehensive hands-on curriculum with certifications, credentials, expert coaches, mentors, a community of practice, paid experience opportunities, industry-preferred software access, live events, and ongoing updates. Your entire instructional design career is neatly packaged behind a single login. Check out all the details at www.idlecourses.com/academy, and you can use my code Luke for $88 off the yearly membership. And folks, one more announcement. The next cohort, the 6th cohort of Instructional Design Institute, is going to be kicking off again on Monday, October 28th. If you have not heard about this yet before, this is our program to cover the fundamentals of instructional design. We cover different types of topics such as andragogy, analysis, backward design, universal design for learning, generative AI, have to cover that nowadays, as well as evaluation methods and creating different types of portfolios. We go through things every single week with live sessions. You'll be getting my feedback every single week on your assignments with lots of hands-on activities where you are going to be learning about essentially everything when it comes to being able to design a type of a meaningful, relevant, and interesting form of learning experience. If this is something that you want to be able to take part in for joining other different types of learning nerds such as yourself, well then, hey, you should apply to the next cohort. Go down below inside of the show notes. Can't wait to see you there. Okay, let's bring on the introduction music and let's start the show. Hello, learning nerds, and welcome on in to the nerdiest podcast you're going to hear today. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson, and I'm your host of the show. And my purpose is to be able to help you along your instructional design journey. Whether you're just starting off or you've been doing this for years, all are welcome on into the show. And of course, you can find all the information I have for you over at drlukehobson.com. Today's episode is all about using GPTs. Specifically, I want to give you 3 different ideas around essentially use cases for creating your own type of customized GPTs. And maybe you were keeping up with the news and you saw this from a couple of months back, but one of the most significant updates that went from ChatGPT 3.5 to GPT-4 was the ability to create your own custom GPTs. Think about creating like your own type of chat GPT, and it could do whatever you essentially wanted. It was an idea, and it sounded interesting, but I kept on thinking about how do we use it for the real world? Because for many people, right now, they're experimenting with generative AI, and we're thinking about it more from an entertainment perspective, which is great. But if we wanted to be able to use this for our work, for our jobs, for productivity, what can we do? And specifically, I was trying to think about creating custom GPTs to better serve you, the aspiring instructional designer, the current instructional designer, the senior instructional designer, and of course, those of you who are my instructional design students who also listen to this show. And I have found a few use cases that I believe if you wanted to replicate these ideas and to be able to either share them with your own audience or be able to just use it for yourself and be able to see what these types of custom GPTs can do, these can absolutely help you out. So first thing is first. Why should you even bother making a custom GPT? ChatGPT, it's already connected to the internet. It can pull information from anywhere. Wouldn't this just be, hypothetically speaking, adding another layer of complexity for users? And actually, I'm finding that it's the opposite. Because one of the things that I keep on hearing about from folks is that when they are first trying to be able to use ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, or any of the other different types of LLMs right now that exist, they feel a sense of either an overwhelming ability. There's way too much. Like, imagine the first time you tried to be able to use Google and you're like, what do I search? I have all the information at hand and I'm going to just search for cat pictures. And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, that's one way of being able to use this. Or trying to think about how to go beyond as far as for what it is giving you with an initial response. So I'm hearing almost like the exact opposite of the overwhelming, which is the underwhelming, where a user is submitting a type of a question or a prompt, and then what they received really wasn't that great of a bit of advice or information, and we're trying to be able to figure out what to do next. So the idea is that by creating a dedicated GPT to a particular topic, you remove the barrier for folks as far as for being able to have the information go directly to them that you are hoping is going to go to them. And at the same time, too, there's quite a bit of customization. You can customize the language, the tone, and even the data for how your users are going to be interacting with the GPT. This, of course, has huge advantages. If you believe that there is misinformation out there online and you're realizing that people keep on reading the same type of thing, well, you can change that. Being able to customize and to change what the GPT says, it gives you more control. And as someone who has been fighting instructional design myths for years, and if you have used ChatGPT, you know exactly what myth I am talking about. It's nice to be able that I can make a correction, and then within my own GPTs, it becomes a permanent fix. So let's talk about 3 real-world cases for GPTs, and that way you can know how to be able to use them. And on top of that, if you want to create your own by the end of this show, you can certainly do so. The first GPT I made was called Your UDL POW, for Universal Design for Learning. One massive benefit of generative AI that I truly believe in is the ability to improve accessibility standards within our learning experiences. This is certainly something that folks are not talking about enough, as far as for the fact that now we have a tool that can really help us out when it comes to being able to design learning experiences for all people, all backgrounds, and everything of a sort. One issue within the universal design for learning world is that unless you have been trained on how to think this way, you may not be aware of the tiny details and the nuances that go into how to follow a framework like with UDL and what to even be able to look for. I've talked with many professors over the years who, once I mentioned about being able to customize content, whether alt text or captions or different types of ideas around assessments and pathways and things of this nature, they were like, oh yeah, it's a great idea, but I would have never thought of that. And that's like, yeah, of course, because you're thinking about the content specifically. You're thinking about the teaching styles and everything. You're not thinking particularly about going into the weeds and making sure that this is all accessible. Yes, we're definitely getting in the right direction, but still, there are these different types of times where if they were aware, I really do think the heart is in the right place, but unfortunately, things fall to the wayside. And because of all of these things, this led to an idea, which was, could I create a GPT that could help people to make their courses and learning experiences more UDL friendly? So off I went to go and try this within OpenAI. And the process back then, when this first came out for GPT-4, it was a little bit different. It still has some of the same types of things nowadays, but essentially here is how it went, is that I had to give the GPT a name. I had to then add a logo. I then had to describe what the GPT should be doing and then mention any particular topics to include. This was then usually followed by a series of prompts and follow-up questions to get the most out of you for the information as far as for what the GPT should really contain. And because this was the first time that I made a GPT, when it kept on asking me, should I include this, should I include this, and should I include that? And I'm like, yes, include everything. Whatever you know about UDL, include it all. So it put everything together. Eagerly, I went to the preview mode to be able to give it a test run, and immediately I was disappointed. I was like, oh, that's not right. Nope, that kind of fell flat. If you're wondering, like, well, why? Like, what was so bad? And all of a sudden, it was doing something so wrong so soon. Well, the thing was is that when I went to be able to go and to ask it to describe for me UDL, kind of wanted like its definition, what is it exactly going to say? It mentioned talking about being able to design learning experiences for all folks, which is great, but then it also added in the bonus words of making sure to include their particular learning style. You're like, "Oh, well, so what ended up happening is after whipping my laptop out the window and going to Best Buy and buying a second laptop out of frustration, I wanted to see if I could tell the GPT what not to include. It was always saying what to include, but if I want to exclude something, do not talk about learning styles. Could I actually change that? So I went back into the edit mode and I mentioned, as far as we're saying, that if someone asks about learning styles, I want you to gently remind them that learning styles are not backed by credible evidence. This has been a myth that has been going through with the L&D space for forever, but it's just that. It is a myth. And of course, if users who are responding to this GPT want to be able to dive in further into this and to read more about this, then give them information to help them. After inputting that information, it was time to launch it again and to give it a spin and to see what would happen. So what I did is that I uploaded a former syllabus and I asked it to review my content through a UDL lens and to see how I can improve the language that I used in there. And sure enough, it gave me a few recommendations, which is like, okay, I think we're now getting on track. I then asked it for a type of a banter with me. I wanted to be able to try and help the problem as far as for when folks are trying to be able to apply UDL into what they do. Sometimes, unfortunately, you hear from people that they get a lot of resistance and pushback. They're facing challenges, and they'll often hear concerns from their manager or director or whoever it is, whoever SMEs. They talk about how it's too costly, it's too time consuming, it's too this, it's too that, it's unnecessary, whatever might be the concern. So what I asked it to be able to do was to create a list of the top 10 common reasons for why people are against UDL. And then I want you to give me the answers to these types of problem sets and to be able to essentially have a script that a user could then give or say to the manager, the SME, the whoever next time around to try to be able to give the counterpoints for this. Essentially, arm folks with more information how to be able to have a productive conversation. And it did. It gave me a top 10 list of the common types of complaints, if you will, for UDL and how to be able to work around those and to have a productive conversation, which is pretty darn good and also extremely useful because this does often happen within the real world. And it was amazing to be able to know that if you wanted to be able to use your UDL pal, which by the way, you can, if you go into the show notes for this podcast, you can find a link that goes directly into there and you can interact with this and be able to see this exact same type of information. And of course, if this can help you with your own content and learning experiences or having these conversations with other people from the organization, this can give you that information to be able to help. And I also have to give a huge shout out to all of you, by the way, who have already used your UDL pal. What I can see on the back end, I really can't see much, but the only thing I can see from the data perspective is how many people have used it. And so far, it seems like 200 plus of you have currently used your UDL pal, which is awesome. So I hope that it's been helping you so far. And of course, if you haven't used it yet, go in, check it out, and see things for yourself. The next GPT I want to chat with you about is called Instructional Design Interview Coach. If you picked up the latest edition of the textbook Instructional Design Trends and Issues in Instructional Design and Technology, you'll see my chapter about artificial intelligence. In the text, I described about how I have been working on creating a new kind of simulation. Based around your feedback, this gave me an idea from hearing from you about how you want to be more prepared before you go into your next interview and you are finding it difficult to be able to do, whether from trying to find a person to do a mock interview with, or you kept on hearing a ton of different types of conflicting information, you just wanted more help. So this gave me an idea of, could I create for you a simulation that would create a mock interview with common interview questions that I think would be appropriate to ask an instructional designer. It would then give you feedback based on your answers, and then you would even receive a score at the end, because why not? We love getting grades for some reason in the United States. So we'll just go about with doing that. So that was the point, to try to be able to make this an interactive and interesting type of a simulation. And I kind of wanted it to feel essentially like a game. I'm not going to say gamified because that goes down a slippery slope. But I wanted it to sort of feel like this type of a game for you to be able to go through, and of course, to be able to help you get those types of mental practice reps in before you go into your interview. So I was able to do this. I was able to create a simulation. I was able to even customize the appearance. There was a lot of back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it took me, I don't know, probably at least 10 different times to be able to really get this thing to do what I wanted to be able to do. Even just to have ChatGPT tell me it can create a simulation, because it kept on denying it, which had to figure out a way how to be able to get around that issue. And, it's giving it a pep talk. Like, of course you can. I believe in you, little buddy. Like, I'm sure you can do it. And yeah, eventually, it's kind of not an exaggeration. That's sort of how I did it. But I ended up eventually sending it over screenshots and proof of evidence from other people who built out simulations in ChatGPT to be able to have it say like, oh yeah, maybe I can do this. So that was wild. But luckily, we don't have to do that anymore. The whole point of sharing about this story was that trying to be able to create a simulation from scratch and then to be able to customize not just the look and the feel, but then the content, the feedback, the responses, everything. It took way too much time. Just an absurd amount of time, which is why I never released it into the public, even though it's on my laptop right now, but it did not live up to expectations. It wasn't until GPT 4.0, the latest update, that I decided to go back into the GPT builder, and I wanted to test this out again. So I took a different approach. Maybe I don't need a simulation. Maybe I can just build a GPT to be able to do this, and it's going to do the job. So I inserted different types of common instructional design interview questions, and I also mentioned to the GPT to ask you questions based around learning design, collaborating with SMEs, project management, research, and technology. Those are kind of like the big 5 areas of instructional design if I had to categorize them. And then from there, it would give you feedback based on the responses. And on top of that too, which is something that was important to be able to do, would be if you had follow-up questions based around the question and response dialogue, that you could ask follow-up questions, and then it could actually give you the reference or the source for the information of where it was pulling this information from, which I tried that out. So it asked me, for one of the interview questions, it asked me to walk them through the ADDIE process, which is like, oh, okay, sure. Let's go through all these different types of steps. But at the end, it gave me a couple of bits of pieces of feedback, and I asked it about where it was getting the information from, and it was able, indeed, to pull from a couple of different websites talking about ADDIE, and also refer to a couple of different textbooks that I was able to look up as well. So you do have that ability to be able to go through and to then learn more, just to be able to just double check this information. Don't just take anything, by the way, PSA, don't just take anything for what generative AI gives you as that it has to be the end all be all. There are often times where the information is either not right, or perhaps it's kind of close, but not 100% accurate. It's still pulling information from its own database, and now it can crawl through the internet, which, as you know, not everything on the internet is real. So let's make sure we're double checking our stuff here. And that was the whole point of being able to ask those follow-up questions. After a couple of trial runs, though, I was shocked by how accurate the questions were, about the feedback and the response. It was pretty darn good overall. And if you don't have a person to be able to do a mock interview with, this can be a great substitute to be able to help you out. Is it a perfect replica of a human being? No, of course not. It's not going to replace an actual interviewer. And in the real world, you're going to have an interviewer who's going to throw at you some type of crazy curveball question. And you're like, why? What does this have to do with instructional design? And that can happen because people are people. But for the most part, common questions, this is an awesome place to be able to start to help you if you're trying to be able to prepare for your next interview. And of course, if you're already an instructional designer and you're telling me you're preparing for a director level role or preparing for something else that's even higher up the food chain, then you can do that too. Yeah, you certainly don't need to use my GPT. You can just go into ChatGPT itself and mention that you're preparing for a director level position at this college and you want to be able to talk about X, Y, and Z topics, and you can go through the whole motions and to be able to have that type of prep for you no matter what you're doing. So another type of an idea for you to be able to use. Now, the last GPT, it's kind of like a trick thing, is that it's two in one, if you will, for this last bullet point. I'm just going to categorize them as the Learning Management System Helper, the LMS Helper. So as many of you know, I teach courses about instructional design over at Instructional Design Institute, with our next cohort launching on October 28th. And I also teach at the University of Miami in the EDD program for Applied Learning Sciences. Now, in these courses, I teach students how to design meaningful, relevant, and interesting types of learning experiences. And of course, to do this, they're going to be getting hands-on actual practice, and indeed, they're going to be building inside of an LMS. And the one that I have been using for the last couple of years is called Brightspace. For the students that have experience building and designing inside of an LMS, it's kind of no problem for them. They're able to kind of figure things out on their own, and they seem to be able to pick things up a little bit quickly. But for others, though, who have yet to build inside of an LMS, or if the LMS that they used previously was not at all like Brightspace and it was just different functions, different features, whatever it is, it can be challenging. It can be challenging to try to be able to learn a new learning management system within 7 weeks. That's how long my courses are. Time goes by really fast within a 7-week time period. And I have tried to do a couple of different ways to help students learn the learning management system in real time. I started to do live demos. There are YouTube videos, there's playlists, but it never felt enough. I was always like, I want to do something more to be able to help in real time, and I'm not sure about what might be the answer here. And it wasn't until recently when one of the IDI students reached out to me, and she said that she was hoping for a list that's going to cover every single type of function and feature and capability of what Brightspace can do. And this had me thinking, where I was like, I don't know of any form of repository that has every single ability that this platform can do. However, I think I could make one. And that's what made me think and look into of, could I build a learning management system helper GPT? So what I did was that I provided instructions in the GPT as far as for saying that if there is anything essentially that a user is trying to be able to learn how to do within Brightspace, you are going to be able to give them a guide step by step, help them to be able to figure it out. And if you don't know the answer, then I want you to find a resource and to be able to then send it to the user, and that way they can go on their own and try to be able to find this information. Fired up preview mode, was experimenting with it. Wasn't really bad at all. I actually didn't have any feedback now that I'm thinking about it. I was like, okay, well, let's give it a shot. So I launched it. It went live. And I asked it to be able to tell me, how do I create a survey within Brightspace? And it kind of gave me like a step-by-step guide for 10 different steps. I then asked, how can I resize an image? It gave me those instructions. I then asked it to be able to share with me, how do I upload a video? And it gave me the instructions on how to do that as well. The thing that I found, which was so interesting, was that it outlined for you every single step. It wasn't just trying to be able to gloss over something. It actually would say, you need to click on this button, this tab, use this wording, upload this kind of file. It was really specific. And that was pretty impressive. And actually, I sent it over to some of my buds who work over at D2L, is the organization who owns Brightspace. And I sent it over to them to say, hey, what do you think of this? Like, this is kind of neat. So I'm going to now be using this inside of my courses for going forwards to be able to add that other layer of support for folks who have not built inside a Brightspace before. But the other thing that I found too was that this isn't just for Brightspace. I built out a second GPT because the courses that I design at MIT are hosted on edX. And I was like, could I make an edX helper? Is that going to work as well? I followed the exact same steps. And sure enough, it really, really gave me some quality information to be able to walk me through any type of assessment or activity I was trying to be able to build in. It gave me a very thorough answer on how to be able to create a rubric. And overall, pretty darn good, especially around the fact too, but sometimes when you're building within an LMS, you're going to have like a really specific problem and you're like, I don't know how to search for something around this one random tiny thing that happened, but now everything is broken and like, what am I doing wrong here? And I've found so far with the GPTs, they've been able to help me with pretty much anything I can think of. So if you want to be able to, or I should say, if you're building currently within Brightspace, give it a try. If you are going to be building in edX, you can use that GPT as well. And of course, if you don't use these and you use another learning platform, I would encourage you to create your own. Nothing to stop you from creating a Canvas GPT or a Blackboard or whatever the other ones are that you're currently using. So give it a shot. It's been pretty interesting and really, really helpful. So I would encourage you to be able to do that. And that, folks, are my 3 GPTs that I'm currently using, and to give you some ideas about how you can use them yourself as a user. And of course, if you are a designer or a professor and you've been trying to be able to figure out how to actually go about doing this, please feel free, experiment away, be able to create your own GPTs. It is pretty darn interesting. You need to be able to have GPT-4, by the way, to be able to do this. So just an FYI, make sure that you do have that. And unless that changed, but I think that's still the case. But things change all the time in generative AI land, so be sure to double check that. But as of the timing of recording this, that was still the case. If you have been creating GPTs, tell me, what have you been working on? I am extremely interested to hear about the different types of GPTs that you have been creating, either for yourself as an individual or for your institution. And of course, if you have not yet built out your own GPT, well, tell me, which one are you going to create first? Because it's a rabbit hole, I promise you. It's really interesting and fun to be able to experiment with and to figure out different types of ways of using AI to help us with productivity and solving problems and everything of a sort. And as always, if you enjoyed today's show, give it a 5-star rating wherever you are listening. Those reviews really do help out the show to grow, and I greatly appreciate whenever you do leave a positive review. Of course, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. And that, folks, is all I have for you today. Stay nerdy out there, and I'll talk to you next time.